It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. Glad to have you on board. Thanks very much for joining with us. If you're joining us live on our website, great to have you on board. Thank you very much. If you're listening to us on Patriot FB on an audio stream, that's outstanding, and I'm glad to have you on board. I missed yesterday, and I apologize, but I got about 5 inches of ice, and so, frankly, it just wasn't in the cards for me to get here. So my apology to those of you that catch the show every day, but you had to hear a repeat yesterday. So this morning we're going to kind of tackle on a couple of different issues, especially in light of what's going on over in the Ukraine. And we want to cover some of that stuff and kind of bring you up to speed, or at least have you take an inside look at it. Our first topic, because it's the shortest duration of the 4 segments in the morning, is Common Core and the common traits of statists and how they're using Common Core to advance their agenda. You know, we constantly are bombarded by these concepts and principles which really are totally against the concept of common sense in our nation. And we see the names that these folks provide and produce for all of their agendas. And Common Core is no different. You know, you'll see a lot of states are actually trying to declare that Common Core is a state-led initiative and so forth and so on. We're going to talk a little bit about that and how politicians use the names of their legislation, quite frankly, to send a message that is intended to mislead and fool you. And so there was a great article out there this morning on the Daily Caller about it. And I'm also going to take the time here to throw Mike Huckabee under the bus on this Common Core thing. You know, a lot of people stand here and believe that Huckabee is the conservative voice in America on the religious right. I got to tell you, what he's doing in supporting Common Core is a tragedy, and he should be held accountable for that. Okay, our second topic is going to be the discussion in relation to Putin, Obama, the Ukraine, and how all of this conspires to become, for the most part, at least our initial reactions to it at this stage are that this is going to be an epic failure for the United States of America, for a lot of reasons. One, we're being outmaneuvered, outfoxed, and outplayed. Two, we have left Putin in the position of having all the cards in his hand. Three, we have China and Russia conspiring together and independently, so collectively and unilaterally, to damage or injure the United States even further than our own president already has. And then our third topic is going to be a critical thinking exercise on the Ukrainian issue. And I'll tell you why I say that. There was an extraordinarily thought-provoking article that was out in CNS News. And, you know, one of the things that I try to do here is to give you guys an opportunity to exercise critical thinking outside the normal confines of what your opinions and your ideas and your beliefs are. And this particular article was interesting because a Ukrainian envoy in the UN had come out and basically said to the United Nations Security Council in a meeting, let me throw this out to you this way. Suppose, for argument's sake, that at some point in time, the President of the United States left the White House and went somewhere, and while he was gone, Mitt Romney went to the White House, and he and Congress conspired to impeach him and, for all intents and purposes, take over the nation. His question was, would that be a democratically legal move? And the reason I'm throwing this out there is not because that's realistic, but because what is realistic is that at some point in the relatively near future, we as a nation are going to have to make a determination and decision on how we are going to act to preserve and restore our nation back to some semblance of legitimacy. And it's time that we put our thought process to that, to one, ensure that we're not acting in an unconstitutional fashion ourselves, because that would be destructive of our aims and our goals. But secondarily, to look at it and look at it from a step back and say, how would this be viewed by the world, by the supporters of Obama, by the supporters of the Patriot movement, by the supporters of those, and by the independents in the country who really, for the most part, are walking around not quite sure of exactly what's happening, but knowing that they've got this foreboding feeling in the back of their head that something's desperately wrong. It's time that we actually put together some constructive processes and looked at the options that are available to us and how those are going to be viewed. Because at some point in time in the near future, there is no parallel for where we are today, and we're going to have to determine how we're going to take action. And we have to make sure, one, that it is constitutional, not only from a legal perspective, because we don't want to rely upon technicalities, but that it is legal from a constitutionally principled perspective. That's an important aspect, and we cannot overlook that or allow our desire to restore the nation turn us into exactly that which we abhor. Our fourth topic is going to be how the Ukraine might actually save the United States of America. And again, this is another exercise in critical thinking. I want you to think outside of the parameters of how you normally view things. And instead of being reactionary, I want you to think a little bit outside the box of how would I view this in a different light? What can the benefits be of the Ukrainian situation, and how will that ultimately possibly benefit the United States of America? So, without further ado, let's get on to our first topic, which is this Common Core topic. The article out this morning in Daily Caller, Common Core proponents try to save the flailing standards using this one weird trick. Now, that's a play off on that stupid ad you see out there all the time, Missourians or Alabamans or Nevadans or whatever state you're in, save X dollars on their insurance using this one weird trick, or lose weight using this one weird trick. So it's not a commercial, it's actually an article, and he was just playing on the words. The concept here is that this trick that's used is, and he compares it, and the author compares it, his name is Eric Owens, he's the education editor for Daily Caller. He compares this to the movie called Coming to America, which was an Eddie Murphy movie back in the late 80s. And basically what he's suggesting here is that Murphy worked at this fast food restaurant, which, paralleled exactly what McDonald's did, but they called it McDowell's. And the logos were similar. In other words, McDonald's had the golden arches, but McDowell had the golden arcs. McDonald's had a Big Mac, but McDowell's had a Big Mick. And, basically, the argument is that this was an exact duplicate or a replication of what McDonald's was doing, but with enough name changes that they could get away with it legally. The comparison is to what states are now doing to force the implementation of Common Core, which we know to be a destructive mechanism for indoctrination of our children. And anyone who would deny that at this point can be put in the category of those who would be either for it because they have some vested interest in it, or because they have not done their homework and taken an objective look at what Common Core is designed and geared upon. By the way, if you're a parent and you have not looked seriously at Common Core and you're not familiar with it and what it does and what it means and how it's going to affect your children, I'm going to submit to you right now that you have completely abdicated your responsibility as a parent to your children, and you should be ashamed of yourself. If you're a parent and you just took offense at that, tough luck. How's that? The simple truth is this. You as a parent have one obligation, and that is the protection of your children. And that doesn't include just their physical protection, doesn't include just keeping them warm and well fed. It includes their mind, which is quite frankly far more important than all the rest of those things. And if you have abdicated your responsibility to your child, I have nothing further to talk to you about. But in this instance, what's happening is the states are attempting to change the names. And what they're looking to do is to try to change the name so that you cannot, or as a parent, can't associate it with Common Core. As an example, in Florida, they've changed, they're rebranding Common Core as, quote, Next Generation Sunshine State Standards. Say that 5 times fast. Next Generation Sunshine State Standards. I'm not going to even try. In Iowa, they're changing the name and trying to rebrand and relabel this as the Iowa Core. In Arizona, they have superficially changed it to Arizona College and Career Ready Standards. So here's my point. What I want you to do is recognize that the vast majority of names that statists give to legislative initiatives, any kind of Common Core as a specific example, which is not a legislative initiative, but it is a federal takeover of the school systems. They rename these things because we as Americans, for the most part, live on the 10-second soundbite. That's what you hear on the news. That's what you hear on the radio. When those bits of news that you do hear, you normally don't get a full grounding and a full understanding of what they are. That's why I've had people say to me, well, why do you have this 30-minute or 25-minute segment that you do on each topic? You only break the show into 4 segments. Other hosts, will take a 2-hour show and they'll cover 10 segments. Well, the truth is, I try to choose those segments that I think are representative of the topics that are important to America. And then I don't want to just give you that 30-second soundbite or the elevator version. I want you to be thoroughly understanding of the issues surrounding it. And yes, I bloviate a lot. Everybody does. I mean, that's this business, right? If you're sitting behind a microphone, your job is to talk. And yes, a lot of it is my opinion coupled with how I view the information that's out there. But I try to make sure that you have an understanding of a different perspective than you're being given by the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda. That's the goal. The principle, the premise is, don't accept what you're being told from the Ministry of Propaganda, whether that be the news media on video, whether that be audio, whether that be written in a newspaper, whether it be something you're hearing on radio. Because the one thing that apparently is completely underrepresented in America is the Patriot concept of, let's just go back to what worked and what we knew was good for our country. Nobody wants to talk about that. Even those guys who are the big names, Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and those guys, to a certain extent, and I'm not trying to trash anybody here, I'm giving you my opinion or my perspective of it. Those guys bring out a lot of these issues, and they have a lot to say about them. I guess my concern with it is that they're not going far enough. They don't, represent what I think a significant percentage of America is really feeling about this. And whether that's because they can't and still retain their lead dog position in the industry, or whether that is because they've been pressured, I don't know. Maybe they just don't see it quite as starkly as I do, and hopefully you. Maybe they don't, and if that's the case, and they've got a bigger worldview than I do, and I'm myopic in my understanding of issues, okay, and perhaps that is the case. They're far more successful than I. I mean, I've got a relatively pipsqueak audience in comparison to what you get from a Rush Limbaugh or a Levin or a Glenn Beck. I mean, well, be that as it may, the simple truth is the game of renaming, the game of labeling, has become a method of tripping America up And I think the media is guilty of it, and that includes conservative news talk radio. That includes conservative news on Fox, which is really the only, even close to conservative. But I look at Fox, and in many cases I say they're controlled opposition. And I'll tell you why. I don't see them coming out here and exposing these Common Core issues the way I believe they should. And I got to assume that's from the top down. There's no other way. There's no other logical explanation for why Fox would fail to expose Common Core for what it really is. I mean, I hear it occasionally blurbed across, but it's a soundbite. I hear, some of the hosts take it on once in a while, but they give it no more than a couple of minutes of token, kind of passing. They hit it in passing, but they never actually stand and fight it. They kind of walk by and slap it, but they never actually stop and say, here's a 1-2 punch and a follow-up. And I'm disturbed about it because America as a nation has a limited time to stop this process in Common Core before it completely invades our educational system. And this is Common Core is the equivalent of a parasitic entity that once it gets inside will be almost impossible to dislodge, not without killing the patient to accomplish the task. And we already have enough problems with our education system. Adding to that by turning around and injecting an even worse system than we already have now is counterproductive. The truth is, Americans don't get a full understanding of Common Core because, for whatever reason, the Ministry of Propaganda is acquiescing to it. They're either agreeing to it, or they've been coerced or co-opted or pressured to not discuss it and not expose it for what it really is. I've gone to many Common Core meetings, and I've heard some real, true, earnest people speak in reference to Common Core and expose a lot of the characterizations that make it up. Anyone who looks at it objectively cannot possibly walk away from the evidence and the facts, the empirical documentation, and say Common Core is good for this country. You have New York, perhaps New York City, perhaps the height of culture and income and finance in the world. And yet 80% of the children who graduate there have to go back in and take rudimentary, elementary reading classes in order just to get into state university. We're not talking about a higher college here. We're not talking about Ivy League. We're just talking about the basic community college, state university of New York. They have to go and take remedial classes on math, reading, language, literature, just to get into college. 80%, folks. And when you have a staggering cost associated with the educational system in New York, and you look at the fact that they were one of the forerunners of implementing Common Core, you have to draw the correlation. The NEA, National Education Association, just came out the other day and has rejected Common Core, saying that they've bungled this thing so badly, it's unsalvageable. Mike Huckabee, he went in and he spoke at the Council of Chief State School Officers. And he and Jeb Bush, by the way, are both open and adamant supporters of Common Core. And so I encourage you to make sure that if either of those men throw their hat into the ring for a 2016 election, that they are resoundingly defeated. Because if Mike Huckabee would stand for Common Core after having looked at the information that's available on it, I can no longer trust the man's judgment, much less his motivations. Jeb Bush, I wouldn't trust Jeb Bush to, put my campfire out with a 25-gallon bucket of water. Huckabee went into this Council of Chief State School Officers, and he admitted that the Common Core brand name has become, quote, toxic. And so he is urging education bureaucrats and these people who run these state school boards to change it. Here's what he said. Rebrand it, refocus it, but don't retreat. Mike Huckabee has made a statement there by reinforcing and doubling down on his position that Common Core is a good thing for these school systems, that calls into question his integrity, his judgment, and his honor. Governor Haley from South Carolina, Nikki Haley, she completely disagrees. And her comment, I think, was very telling. She said, we don't ever want to educate South Carolina children like they educate California children. We want to educate South Carolina children on South Carolina standards, not anyone else's standards. There are now 46 states and D.C. that have begun implementing either all or parts of Common Core. They're changing the name to try to fool you into believing it's something that it's not. Beware, be wise, and make sure that in your state you are doing anything and everything, even if you don't have children, to fight back against the criminality of Common Core. It is intended to manipulate and turn your child's mind from that of independence, self-reliance, free thought, critical thinking, to an automaton. Make no mistake about it. Common Core is bad for your children, and it's bad for America. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to tackle this Putin, Obama, Ukraine, and the epic failure for the United States. I want to look at it from a number of different perspectives because this is a critical issue. It has the potential to turn into something much larger and much more toxic than it currently is. And it has the ability to drag the United States into a confrontation with Russia and China that can be devastating for us as a nation. We're going to take a quick break. When I return, we'll tackle that. I would like for you, in the meantime, to get yourself a cup of coffee. We'll be back in just a second.